Okay, so now that we've talked about least common multiples, we're going to move on to finding common denominators. And we're going to use what we learned with the least common multiples to find the common denominators. So in this worksheet, we have two sections. If you want to follow along, this is practice number 9-6. You can find that on the Envisions website where all the pages are linked. In the first section here, we're going to just find what common denominator we would use for each question. We don't even need to rename the fractions, and we don't need to do any adding or subtracting here. We're just thinking about the common denominator. That will be exactly the same process that we used when we did least common multiples. Okay, they're essentially the same thing. So let's go ahead and do number 1 together, and then we'll come down here and do number 9. And 9 through 16, you're practicing how to find the common denominator and then rename the fraction using that common denominator. Okay, so let's start with number 1. Here we are. 2/5 and 3/4. Okay, so look at our two denominators, 5 and 4. Let's go ahead and write out the multiples of these two numbers, and we'll find the least common multiple. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Now I already see a common multiple, so I can go ahead and stop because it's going to be the least. If I stop at the first one, that's the least common multiple. Okay, so that would be our common denominator for number 1, 20. So I might write this here to the side. Okay. Number 2. Oh, number 2 is tricky. Number 2, the numbers are pretty big. We have an 8 and a 9. 5/8 and 4/9. Now, sometimes if I am thinking about these two numbers and I can't automatically think of a number that would be a common multiple, then I could always just multiply these two together. 8 times 9 is 72. So I could just start with that. But let's go through our process and check it out and be sure that that's going to be the least common multiple. 8. So this is where you really need to know your facts, guys. 24, 32, 40, 48. Uh-oh, I'm going to run out of room. 48, 56, 64, 72. Okay, now if I look at all of these numbers, I know that none of these are multiples of 9. But I can still write it out if I'm unsure. You can always write it out. 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72. Okay, so 72 is correct. Okay, so I would use the number 72 as the denominator, which just means that if I was going to rename this fraction, 9 times 8 is 72, I would also multiply the top number by 8. So let's go ahead and practice that in the second section, numbers 9 through 16. And if you'd like, you can go ahead and pause the video and practice here, okay? Okay. So in number 9, we have 3/12 and 3/8. And I remember that the 8 and the 12 were numbers from our least common multiples worksheet as well. So I already remember the least common multiple. but I'm going to go ahead and write it out anyway so you can watch. So if in your mind you know that 8 times 3 is 24 and 2 times 12 is 24, you don't have to write this out. You could just say, oh, it's 24. But if you don't remember or you don't know your math facts 100% yet, then you could write it down. You could look at your multiplication chart. You could do many different things to figure out what is the least common multiple. Now we'll use that as our common denominator. So let's see. We'll rename our fractions using 24 as the denominator. Now, when you see that they wrote the word and here, that means we're not adding or subtracting. We're just looking at the fractions as two different fractions. So what did I multiply this 12 by to get 24? I multiplied by 2. So whatever I did on the denominator, I have to do on the numerator. 3 times 2 is 6. Let's look at this fraction. How did I get this 24? 8 times 3 is 24. Whatever I did on the bottom, I have to do it on the top, times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, then once I've renamed these, if this was an adding problem or a subtracting problem, then I would go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's all that we have to do here for these. Find the common denominator and rename the fractions. Excellent. Okay, let's work out one of these word problems and then we'll stop there. Okay, let's do number 17. Okay, let's read it together. Train A arrives at Central Station on the hour and every 12 minutes. Train B arrives on the hour and every 15 minutes. When do both trains arrive at the same time? Okay, so on the hour means at the 00. So like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Okay, and then every 12 minutes after that. All right, so we will have 12. Let's go to a new page. So we'll have 12 and we'll have 15. Now these are the numbers that we're going to be looking at, the least common multiple. And we'll be finding the common denominator. Okay, so within an hour, let's go ahead and write down, let's start with 1 o'clock. Let's write down each time that this train A comes into the station. It's every 12 minutes. So 1 o'clock, 1:12, 24, 36, 48, and 60. So you will see this is exactly the same as what I did here. I just decided because it's time, I decided to list them like this. Okay, so in the 1 o'clock hour, this train A would arrive 6 different times. Okay, and actually, I just noticed a mistake. 1:60 is not a real time. It would be 2 o'clock. Okay, that was silly. Okay, so let's try train B. It arrives every 15 minutes. So on the hour would be 1 o'clock. Then it would arrive at 1:15, 1:30, 1:45, and then again at 2 o'clock. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices and find out what is the correct answer. Looking at our page where we wrote our numbers and the answer choices. On the hour and 30 minutes past the hour? Nope, that's not the same time. In fact, the only times that I see that are the same are the 1 o'clock and the 2 o'clock time. So looking at my answer choices here, I believe D would be the correct answer. On the hour only. Okay, do you see why that is? Because they don't have any other common times when they arrive. Okay, good work. That was a tricky question. Okay, so you can work on number 18 and 19 by yourself if you like. I have not posted the answers to any of these worksheets, but if you would like to know the answers, if you worked out all of the examples and you would like to know the answers, then feel free to send me a message and ask me for those, and I'll work them out and send them to you. Okay? Great job, boys and girls.